I'm in my home office on eBay right now. This is where all the magic happens, by the way. This is where I edit all the videos you see on YouTube. But I'm on eBay and I'm going to buy a transmission. And I've purchased a few transmissions before on eBay, and even though I know a lot about them, I always seem to get burnt. And so I found a really good deal on eBay. I'm going to buy this transmission, I'm going to show you the ad, and then I'm going to take the unit apart when we get it in and see if it matches what was in the ad. This is very important because every week I get phone calls from people who have purchased some transmission on eBay only to find out that it's not what they said they were going to be getting, and they're very disappointed with their purchase. So let's go through this crazy ordeal here and see what I got. So I'm going to go look at an ad right now on T5 transmissions because that's what I'm looking for. And as you can see, there are many different T5 transmissions that seem to be painted many different colors. This one looks like it's painted some sort of gray color. These down here look like they're blue. One that's a natural color. Lots of different transmissions, different prices all over the place. So I stumbled across this eBay ad. It says Borg-Warner Tremec Mustang 8593 World Class 335 T5 transmission rebuilt. And looking at the ad here, you can see transmission looks painted, looks fairly clean, but notice that it has an aluminum bearing retainer and it has kind of a rusty reverse light switch. Go to the next picture and it shows a picture of the gear train, and this looks like a really nice gear train. Seems to have good engagement sheath on the main drive. The main drive actually looks new, but this picture shows a steel bearing retainer over here. Nice third gear, nice new second gear, and it looks like a kind of used rusty first gear. It's hard to see, but that could be some distortion in the pictures. And the final picture is a 5th speed set that again shows very good engagement teeth and pretty nice clean gears, and actually one of those little stabilizer plates that people copy of mine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this transmission apart now and see if what I'm actually getting is what was represented in the pictures, because for the most part the ad does not state anywhere that the pictures are not representative of what they're selling. So I cut and pasted the text of the eBay ad so I would not show the eBay seller's ID. And over here what you can see is it says up for bid is a 0-mile rebuilt world-class Mustang T5 5-speed transmission. And it says that this is a 335 first gear V8 T5 with the following gear ratios. First is 335, second 199, third 134, fourth 1-to-1, and a fifth 0.68 overdrive. The rebuild included a new Tremec cluster gear, second gear, upgraded carbon fiber synchros, bearings, seals, and a steel front bearing retainer. This T5 will fit the 83 to 93 Mustang as well as the older 65 and later classic Mustang with the 289 351 Windsor-based engine. A 90-day warranty is included. Now sometimes it's important to realize that over here it says upgraded carbon fiber synchros, that's plural, and bearings. Now I'm assuming that all the bearings are going to be changed in the transmission as well as all the synchros. The reason why I'm buying this is because it's got a new Tremec cluster gear and a new second gear as stated over here. And to me the value that was on the eBay ad of $875 is what I purchased it for. I thought it was a very good value because they can use the new parts and resell the used parts if I need to. Let's see what we got. So this transmission seems to be painted just like the one in the picture. I noticed it's got a new reverse light switch, which is cool, and it does indeed have a new front bearing retainer. The rest of it seems painted. The hardware itself is very old hardware. It's not new hardware, but it's not cleaned that well either. And if you look inside here, it's still pretty little dirty. For somebody who was doing a rebuild, sometimes you want to clean these up a little bit better. And this is a very old extension, T5 extension housing. These are one of the early world-class extensions, but we're not buying it for that. We're buying it for the cluster gear inside, and let's see what we got. I took all the bolts off, but I want to show you something about this. This is a really good example of why I don't like using silicone sealer. This box was shipped to me about a week ago, and the sealant is still wet. Never use silicone sealant in building a T5 transmission. Even though a lot of people do that, the problem is it stays wet for days and weeks before it dries. And this is bad because basically if you put this thing and fill it up with oil, okay, you're going to have a leak. So it dried over here where it was exposed to air. But wherever it was not exposed to air, it's still wet. So that's why I use these anaerobic sealants, the Permatex 51813. But you can see here that the silicone sealant is still wet. Again, don't build units with silicone. Okay, this 1352 085 025R is a standard 335 ratio input shaft. But this is an aftermarket input shaft, not an original one. He didn't say he was supplying one. It's a nicely used piece. It's got a fair amount of rust on the cone of the gear. A pretty nasty rust mark on there, okay? But it would work, but wouldn't be something that I would normally use. And the needles that he had inside the input shaft were used needle bearings. So he doesn't say he's putting new bearings and everything, okay? He just says he's upgrading the rings. But it did have a new front bearing, it looks like, on it, with a new race and a new bearing here. But this is an aftermarket input shaft. Okay, I popped off the extension housing, and first thing I noticed is that everything is really dirty inside. This gear looks like it was laying on a shelf, and it was never cleaned. Look. Okay? Not even wiped down. Just thrown in here dirty, like this. So, this is horrible. And all these parts that are on this transmission are extremely dirty inside here. So they never were cleaned. And on top of that, if we go look over here on the shaft, not it's bad that it's rusty like this, but I really like when people take the time to blast gears and blast shafts and clean up the surface rust. That's what adds to a nice rebuild. Over here, let's go look at the extension housing. This is an old extension housing. This is actually a non-world class extension housing. You could use non-world class extensions on world class transmissions. It's been done before, but you could see that this is not a world class piece, meaning that the transmission was, put together out of a bunch of parts. But I'm not too happy about the level of this dirt on these gears over here like that. I don't like when nobody takes the time to clean out the dirt in between all the gears. So these gears were laying around on the shelf just put together without even being cleaned. And again, notice the sealant here. It doesn't even stay well, the silicone sealant, because it was wet still. That's the problem again with silicone sealant. So you can get leaks like this. This bolt was giving me a hard time trying to get out. In close inspection, it's stripped. So there's probably a helicoil in here, or the case may be stripped. Who knows? I'll get to that later. All of these gears look fairly good in this transmission. But the guy obviously does not know how to clean transmissions that well and really is in need of a good cleaning tank. But the engagement teeth on the first and second speed gears look really good. Let's dig in further and see what we got. One thing, if you're going to put in roll pins, make sure you put them in flush so you don't lose half the surface area on the shift forks. Putting in a roll pin like this will usually cause the fork to break because it's not even locating on the top end of the fork. The pin is ready to fall out of the bottom. This is an early design T5 fork. There's nothing wrong with them. The later T5 fifth speed forks were actually a little bit beefier and came down to here. So this is an early fork. Nothing wrong with it again. Again, lots of dirt in this transmission. There's one of the reasons why it didn't spin up so well is because you could see the amount of debris and dirt in this box. Now this is supposedly a new, freshly rebuilt transmission. Notice the quality of the workmanship. These shift fork pads on the fifth speed gear shift fork are really worn, and in fact the fork is showing some signs of wear on it because the fork pads were bad, and these were never changed. They were just thrown in the box like this to save money. So as we can see, it does indeed have a brand new OEM counter gear, but if you look at that magnet there on the bottom, the guy never took the time to clean that magnet out down here. Look how disgusting that is. This gearbox is filthy inside. There's metal everywhere. It's got crap all over it. I don't know why anybody would even put it together. But the guy did tell me he was going to put a new counter gear in it and a new second gear, and that appears to what has been going on here. It has been changed, but the rest of the box is absolutely disgusting. This reverse gear, even though it will work, sometimes will cause a little bit hard to get in gear because the teeth are so blunt and it can't get in between these other teeth on the counter gear. But look at the dirt on this gear over here. Look at it from just being in here. A little bit disgusting. The other thing is the end play on the box is too loose. It's got a fair amount of play in it like this, and if you shimmy these and hear it, and the reason why it sounds noisy like this is because of all the dirt that's already in the bearings inside the transmission. So I'm going to pull this all apart, throw out this case because the case is stripped. Looks like they put a helicoil in it and messed the helicoil up. And I'll use some of the parts that I needed to build another unit. And we'll get to the main shaft. Okay, so I got this gear out of the transmission. And as you can see, it's got a nice ding on it. It's a brand new counter gear. It's a brand new OEM gear. But it's got some nasty damage to the gear. This can be cleaned up. I'm not going to say that this guy did it. It could have been something that Tremac did when they sold him the gear. Or you can see it's quite dirty, the gear. But when you build transmissions, a good builder will take the time to deburr gears. A bad builder will just throw them in the transmission like this guy did. And unfortunately, this is the level of rebuild quality you're getting now on eBay. You're really getting a bunch of people who just throw transmissions together with parts but don't really know how they're supposed to work. So parts changing is one thing. Actually taking the time to rebuild the unit, just look at the dirt and stuff that's all over. This is from paint, from them painting the box and getting paint all on the gears. But it is indeed a new gear, but it was probably a second because it was damaged. But we'll clean this gear up and fix it up. So here's the gear that I took out of the transmission, all cleaned up. I just wanted to show you the area that was dinged up pretty bad and how I clean them up. Unfortunately, this isn't something that the guy did, he just never deburred them. But gears like this come from Tremac all the time with little dings in them and little dents. And you have to be able, as a builder, to be able to clean the teeth up. There was another one over here, I cleaned up the edge over here. So this is what we do, and this is how it's supposed to be done. Here's a close-up of that reverse idler gear I was talking about. You can see the teeth are kind of rolled over in the front. Again, this is typical wear of a reverse idler. It's not bad, but usually, you know, when I do boxes, I put new ones in because they're cheap enough, and I never let boxes go like this. This is something I wouldn't put in the box, but then again, every rebuilder has his or her preferences, and this particularly is not one of mine. I don't put gears like this in transmissions. So this is a used bearing. It's not bad, but I again would not use this in a rebuild that I do. And again, would never build a case with crap like this on the drain plug. All right, this is the way this gear was in this transmission. You can see how dirty it is, and it's just filthy, the gear. And on top of that, the engagement teeth are somewhat rolled over. It's an old 5-speed gear. It's an old design 5-speed gear. It's not something I would even use, especially in this kind of shape and being this filthy. I would never put it in the box like this. I'd always at least clean it and check it. But again, the engagement teeth are pretty well starting to roll over on it. They've got a little bit of an edge on them. If somebody was a good builder, you would take maybe a little grinder and clean this up a little bit to take the raised portion off of the teeth, since it's still got some point definition. So it's still a usable gear, but you need to clean up these edges over here, buddy. You don't do that. Anyway, this gear is garbage. The 3/4 Synchronizer sliders have the same issues. They've got teeth that were starting to get rolled over, probably because of bad Synchronizer rings. It's quite common to see this. Once they lose that point definition, they can cause clunky and hard shifting. The slider's never been cleaned out. It's never been deburred. So what you do is you have this edge right over here where the teeth were starting to get mashed over. Again, good rebuilding. If you want to use the slider, it may be usable, but not in this condition. You want to deburr the teeth and take the edges off the end over here where it was raised up from it getting peened over. So this is something you should do when you're building a transmission and wanting to use this over again like this. Nothing wrong with this piece. You could probably reuse it and get some life out of it. There is still some point definition to the slider, but again, you have to kind of deburr the sharp edges where it was raised up because it will hang up on the 3/4 hub. And so I'll keep this around, but you want to know what? That this goes in the garbage too. Guy said he had new carbon fiber synchronizer rings. But this is a synchronizer ring from like the 80s. The problem with this stuff is two things. They use these aftermarket sliders from China, which don't fit the hubs correctly. Now let's go put the outer shell of the ring back in place here now that everything is gone. So you can't fit the outer shell in the hub, which means the hub is bent from somebody slamming on it. And they just jammed it in place, which this ring would have never worked in. So let me discuss what's going on here with this this hub here. If you look at it right over here, it's got a slight bend to it, and it goes in right about over here. It's a common problem that people never pick up The hubs get bounced around, they get dropped. And as a result, when you put the synchronizer on here, it won't go in. And then they kind of push it in and then jam the ring. And the ring will not turn properly because it won't seat. And it'll cause a shifting issue. So what happens is this hub needs to actually get pulled out over here. Sometimes you can get in there and stretch it back out with a little punch and punch it out and then clean it up again. But the hub is actually fairly damaged. I'm surprised that this person was actually even able to rebuild this transmission with this synchronizer ring like this. It'll go in, but again, it's not right. It's really tight because the hub is bent, and that would cause a shifting issue with it. Other things to mention is if you're going to build transmissions, again, clean them. Look how filthy this whole assembly is. So here's a close-up of the shift fork pads on. This is on the 3/4 fork, and you could see how the pads look with all this junk that's on them. Because they're a plastic composition, it's very important that they be clean when you do a rebuild so they don't end up being impregnated with dirt and debris as these are, which will cause the pads to prematurely fail. So you have a rebuild, but for some reason there's a lot of dirt on these pads and some of the pads look used. Probably the most disappointing aspect of this rebuild was the fact that the synchronizer rings were very early designed T5 world-class rings. This is the first design ring that had this large ledge over here. But if you can see from the paper on the ring is all eaten up. It's black, it's burnt. It's not cool at all. None of these rings have very good paper to them or life left to them. But again, it's a good lesson to learn. This is what you get when you buy stuff on eBay or from subpar rebuilders. The 1-2 rings here would have probably lasted a week if you're lucky, especially with the bent hub. Maybe not even worked at all. They weren't grinding yet, but a couple of good shifts and they would have fallen right apart.
So the question you're probably asking yourself is, was Paul happy with his eBay purchase? And the answer is a big no. Unfortunately, I feel I got burned on everything with this transmission. In fact, that counter gear that was chipped that I deburred, when I went to go put it in the transmission, it was actually noisy. So the teeth were bent anyway. So I really didn't end up with anything good other than maybe a few bearings and one new synchronizer ring and a plastic shifter bushing, a new front bearing retainer, and a new 1-2 slider, which for the most part isn't worth almost $1,000 when you factor in what it costs to ship this damn thing. So I'm going to give this guy hell and try to get some of my money back. But the lesson here, if anything, is if you're going to go out and buy a transmission on eBay, make sure that the pitches that are in the eBay ad actually are representative of the transmission that they're selling. I mean, in this day and age with digital cameras and digital photography and cameras on phones, it's so easy to take pictures of what you're doing and post them with your ad. So I never got that people are just using these generic pictures for rebuilt transmissions. And I would kind of stay away from that if you're ever going to buy a transmission on eBay. My opinion is don't buy anything used on eBay because you don't know what's inside of it. And if you really don't know how the transmission operates, and you don't know what you're looking at, and you don't know what you're looking for, stay away from it and buy something new. And you probably have some better luck going on some online forums and asking around about who does a good rebuild job and who's reputable. But these guys that are on eBay, even if their feedback is a little high, a lot of times it's rigged, and they get their friends to kind of bid on things in the beginning and then give them good reviews, and that's how it works. So that's all I got to say. Take care, and thanks for watching, and please subscribe to my channel and tell your friends about it. Take care again. Oh, by the way, I forgot. If you really want to learn about T5 5-speeds, I got a pretty cool book here on building and modifying manual transmissions, and there's a pretty good section in this book about the T5 5-speed. It's available from Amazon and on my website. Thanks.